Let's talk about A Face in the Crowd. I'm Austinlugo,
I'm Andrew Hart.
and this is Nothing to Say. So how would you describe this movie, Andrew?
A Face in the Crowd is, of course, a 1957 drama film directed by Elia Kazan. It's about a drifter, a drunk, a country musician who essentially becomes a celebrity with a focus mostly on television. Specifically, his name is Larry Lonesome Rose. He's an Arkansas guitar player, kind of getting into it. And he's discovered by Margie. She's like a radio show producer, host, or whatever. And she's like, she goes to a jail, which is kind of funny. It's kind of weird. It's like, I know you guys are in jail, but can I record you for my show? I thought that was kind of funny. And she's like, and she records Larry. And Larry is, of course, played by Andy Griffith. You could only describe his performance as, I guess, enigmatic. The entire time he's insane. He's an insane person. I think for people who watch this movie for the first time, not knowing too much about it, they will definitely be surprised the most by Andy Griffith's performance. Because he's really not in very many movies. And it was only about 3 years later that he was in the Andy Griffith Show, of course, which ran for, I think, like 8 years. And in that show, he plays, of course, a nice small town cop. And then, of course, he went on to play Matlock, which is like a nice lawyer guy. But in this movie, he's kind of like a mean, kind of manipulative, kind of crazy, alcoholic, over the top, loud guy. And it's very striking if you know him more from the show, which most people do.
The experience that you and I have, or anyone who's familiar with Andy Griffith in kind of any context, has a very different experience perhaps than people who saw it at the time, just because when any modern viewer thinks of Andy Griffith, it's this very kind of very nice, kind, just kind of joyful, and he even has, I think, like innocent sort of demeanor about him, and when you see him in this, it's a jarring experience, and I think it works really well. And I think it kind of plays into this innocence that he sort of portrays throughout the film. And I think the casting as him as our Lonesome Rhodes is an incredible choice, because he genuinely looks like someone you can trust. And that's the sort of terrifying underbelly of this whole film, is you keep kind of sort of, it's only in this sense and in no other sense, it's like Lolita, in the sense that this person's a bad person. This person's done a lot of bad things. But throughout the film, you kind of keep being pulled in by him. There's a certain charm that he has, and you just keep being convinced that, maybe he's going to do this right. He's going to do this right. And he keeps being a terrible person.
Yeah, you kind of root for him in a weird way. The other thing that I would, I guess, compare this movie to is, in a way, Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
Except instead of like Citizen Kane was more like newspapers, Face in the Crowd is more like TV. And in Citizen Kane, he literally tries to become a politician, while Larry doesn't try to become a politician. He more kind of like, I guess, consults with them, I guess. But we'll get into that later.
So as you're saying, we open up in this small town, Arkansas. Margie goes to this jailhouse, and she does something called A Face in the Crowd, which the idea of this radio program show is she talks to the people, whoever the people are. And this week she's going to a jailhouse. So she goes into the jailhouse, and she's trying, like, she's expecting this sort of like grimy, brutal sort of jail like experience. But the truth is it's just mostly just a bunch of people just like lazy sitting around. They don't really want to be on radio. Yeah, they don't want anything to do with it. There's the way the jail's kind of set up is kind of strange. So like everyone's in this one room, basically, like the sheriff too. And then there's one black character, and he's behind bars, which is weird. I don't know I guess they were just separated. I mean, I guess Jim Crow laws were in effect during this time. I don't know. And they kind of make like a small, like little thing. I wouldn't say there's many black characters, or the black characters really get much to do in this film, but I'd say he's 1950s woke, I guess.
Larry?
No, Elia Kazan, the director.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He
I
has
guess.
like a couple of moments that are like it's like what a like a modern like woke they're not really doing much of anything, but it's like
And also the movie is written by Bud Schulberg, who was novelist and writer, and I believe he also wrote On the Waterfront as well. So I think I haven't seen On the Waterfront, but I know it has something to do with like unions, right? And like
yes,
working people.
absolutely.
Yeah, like you said, it's like 1950s woke white writer guy. You're definitely correct on that. And I will say that like the whole jail scene is very very good. It's a very good start of the movie.
And it's very beautiful. I think one of the things that I love most about Elia Kazan is he's very good at staging, very good at blocking. I think the visuals, especially when he's working in black and white, just the lighting and the visuals and just kind of where everyone is, it's very crisp and clean and very well thought out. There's always he's not really interested in like a traditional close up, I guess. Almost all the time, there's always something in the foreground and something in the midground and something in the background. There's always a lot of things going on at once. There's never just kind of one thing. Yeah,
It's been a couple years since I've seen Citizen Kane. Doesn't Citizen Kane kind of do that too? Yeah.
yeah, it definitely follows kind of that similar trend. So they're at the jailhouse. No one really wants to speak, and then they say, "Oh, you should talk to this guy, this drunk guy with a guitar," and then we just call him Rhodes. So she wakes him up. He's kind of like all disheveled and drunken, and she convinces him to sing.
Yeah, he's like, "What's in it for me?" And they say like, "You talk to her instead of getting out in a week. We'll get you out tomorrow morning." And he's like, "Okay." And he kind of, while he's warming up, she kind of almost kind of like tricks him into kind of playing, kind of saying stuff off the cuff, kind of singing and playing off the cuff, just country blues music or whatever. And I guess, I think she coins the term lonesome. So she calls him Lonesome, Larry Lonesome Rhodes. And right away, they make it apparent that it sticks, that sticks with his name. I will say, like I said, the scene is really good. Andy Griffith, he's like singing and stuff. He's very loud. He's very crazy. He's very like unpredictable. He's like getting up and down. He does a good job with, kind of like the sensibilities that the character has and being all smiley and stuff. He's very, very good. I will say that there are some like there for me this movie there are like some little things here and there that like didn't that I thought were a little bad, I guess you could say. I will say that like throughout only when he's playing the guitar. So only when he has his guitar, which is maybe like in the first third or half of the movie, they do a really bad job making it seem like he's playing the guitar. Did you notice this? When he's always like cut off and he's moving his hand in a way that does not look real. He's going like this. Did you notice that? He's
Clearly, someone who's never played a guitar before.
I don't know, like it's not like the worst thing in the world or anything like that, but it was very I don't know why. I was just kind of distracted by that. It just didn't. Yeah, that was kind of distracting seeing him go like this. It's just so weird looking. It's like no one, like there was no one there. But yeah, she records it. She leaves, and right away too, that one Marge, you can tell that she's being kind of smitten with him. I think she, pities him or something. And she brings a recording in. I'm not sure if they play the recording or
They play the recording to like her uncle who like owns the radio station.
I wasn't sure if they played it on the radio.
No, I think they just play it for him because
Yeah,
like the cassette.
and he's like, "Oh wow, we need him on the show."
And I think it's also as we kind of move forward to point out that even though a lot of the blame throughout the film is kind of put on Lonesome Rhodes, and rightly so, for his kind of malevolent acts and the way he sort of controls people, I think it's important to note that it is Margie who discovers him, and I think she plays a much bigger role than even I think the film the film kind of like touches on it, but it's very clear that she knows what she's doing when she kind of like first puts him on, and like she's shaping who Lonesome Rhodes is. I think she's almost like a modern PR almost. She's like shaping who this person is and how he kind of works in the world, I guess.
I agree.
So Uncle hears it. The guy who owns the radio station is like, we got to get this guy on our show every day. And so they go to like the jailhouse and he's like, oh, he already left. So they're driving down the street and Lonesome is kind of just, hitchhiking his way to Florida for some reason because there's water there, I guess. I don't know. There's no real reason. It's warm.
There's
And
about like fishing and stuff.
and basically they have this conversation where they convince him to just, come on the show for like one day. And what's interesting is like the first thing they try to do is like they try not pay him off, but like use money to sort of bribe him to come. And he's not really interested by money like that. You can say from the beginning that money isn't his real interest, but then when they kind of talk more about who will hear his show and that kind of thing, you can see that he's much more interested in fame and power than he ever is in money. So they convince him to go to the radio station, and that's where his first broadcast takes place.
Yeah, and basically, and what they establish is that, like, yeah, at first he's singing songs and stuff, and then Margie, and it's like, I guess his first show, Margie kind of tells him, like, hey, like, you got to wrap up in a couple minutes, and he's like, and then he kind of goes on a tangent because he's like funny and kind of, you know, relatable. Maybe not relatable, but I guess he knows how to connect with people. Like he knows how to say the right things to people, I guess. And he has like funny stories, and you know, he has like an interesting life or whatever. I keep saying Margie, it's Marsha.
Yes, Marsha.
I keep saying Margie. Margie's the character in Fargo. But yeah, like and I think he goes on a tangent about like women and stuff, like kind of about like women aren't appreciated enough in their jobs and stuff like that. And it's very, you know, which is true, but it's also very surface level. It's
very
like,
50s woke.
Yeah, and everyone's like, wow, he's right, you know, like, and from there, it kind of almost right away, it's like people are honestly less interested in his music and become more interested in what he's saying. Because for some reason, he's just like I said, the role itself is enigmatic, but the person in the movie, the character in the movie itself is also supposed to be very enigmatic. Mm-hmm. People, you know, are attracted to him in many different ways. And he kind of basically just becomes like a town hero, a town star from there. And there's a couple funny hijinks moments that are kind of fun.
And the hijinks sort of they're just kind of fun, but they're also showing the growth and power and just what exactly it is that someone of, you know, with very little money, but with influence alone can, affect mayor elections and sort of like these local politics. I think it's also important to note this scene at the bar between Marcia and Lonesome Rhodes, because they're having a conversation after I don't know if it's like after the first time he's on the radio or after like he's been on the radio a couple of times. And she sort of asks him about, you know, how much of this is like actually real and how much of this is bullshit. And he kind of dances around the question a little bit, but it's clear that he's playing a part, that, you know, this person who he's playing on the radio is not who he really is. And as you kind of say, it's kind of enigmatic. You're not really sure through the film who Lonesome Road is. And Marcia's, I suppose, one like goal throughout the film is really just to understand him, and her pretty much immediate love for him, I suppose, comes from this sense of wanting, I think it's partly admiration for what he is able to do, this performance he's able to create, but it's also this desire to know him and her continual failure, or rather his continual failure to reveal who he is.
That's probably the best part of the movie. It's just kind of the, in my opinion, it's the best part of the movie. It's just kind of like, you know, one of those scripts that sort of predicts a lot of different things, or at least like hints at things that become almost exaggerated nowadays. Mm-hmm. You know, I always think of like conservative radio talk show hosts, which Larry isn't. He's just basically, he's not really like conservative. I guess he is. He's kind of like more like a people pleaser, I guess. So yeah, whatever. I wouldn't say he's like a conservative. Maybe? Yeah, like a populist. Yeah, not. I guess populism and not even in a left wing or right wing way, just kind of in a general way.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, just kind of like appealing to him, and this comes later in the politics section. But yeah, like he becomes very popular, and I don't know if there's a couple funny, of course, parts where I don't know if you mentioned, of course, like he's like, everyone should put their dogs in the sheriff's yard. And then there was another one where like everyone should go to blah blah blah's house. They have a really nice swimming pool. And that was a really good shot where they're actually listening to the radio.
Yeah.
And at their swimming pool, and like 100 extras like jump in the pool or whatever. And yeah, it's just, yeah, like you said, it's kind of like an introduction to the power that he will kind of really have. It's one thing; those two things are small compared to what a broadcaster can really do. You know, who's, I guess, unhinged. And, you know, sure enough, businessmen come and they're like, hey, like, we want to sign you, like, to come to Memphis. So him and Marcia, they go to Memphis for television, which from here on out, you know, radio isn't really like a thing they talk about or mention. It's really all about television, which kind of makes sense I feel like television is kind of a play on a face in the crowd because, you know, you can kind of obviously look on a television set, you can see a person's face rather than the radio. I feel like a television, especially back then when it was first being introduced and became more common, seeing a person talk to you on a screen feels more intimate and kind of sucks you in a little bit more than maybe even a radio does, at least at that time, of course.
There's this very real sense of modernity to this film and also predictive qualities. The first televised presidential debate was between JFK and Nixon. And this is, you know, a couple of years before that. And it kind of shows, because by the late 50s, radio's sort of, I mean, it's still important, but it's sort of a dying phenomenon. And television is kind of the big new thing. And I think it's also interesting that the radio happens in the countryside, right? In this part of the world. And then once he gets on the television, he's moving to these sort of bigger cities, kind of showing also the juxtaposition between what radio can do and its kind of small town appeal and what television can do in the way it can, as you were saying, it can reach people in a way that radio really never could. And when they actually get on the train to travel to Memphis, there's this big like crowd of people waving goodbye and there's like this big celebration. And they get on the train and there's this really interesting moment where Lonesome Rhodes gets on the train next to Marsha, and I'm gonna paraphrase here because I'm not really sure exactly what he says, but he says, "I'm not gonna miss this shithole." You know, obviously it's a shithole, but basically what he's saying is like, this place is the worst, and I'm not gonna miss it. And you can see like in Marsha's face, because she's from Arkansas, like she's kind of surprised and like unsure, like this is a part of him that she's never really seen before, and he's like, "Oh, I'm just kidding." But
Yeah,
as a viewer, like you're not really sure how to take that.
yeah, and that, you know, that of course foreshadows other events later,
Mhm.
of course. Yeah, his personality, his actual personality, or his actual feelings are more evident. Yeah, they're on the train, everyone's happy. He goes to Memphis, he gets a television show. We're introduced to Mel Miller, played by Walter Matthau, who I like Walter Matthau a lot. He's really good. He's underutilized, I think. He plays more of a dramatic role, not really like a comedic role, really.
Yeah.
But I like him. I like his look. He's classy. He's cool. But he's like a staff writer for the show. He's like a writer. And on the first show that Larry does in Memphis on television, he basically foregoes playing any music. Well, it's funny too. They're like putting on makeup on him and stuff, and he's like, "Oh, this sucks." And he like wipes it off. He gets on the stage. They give him like a hat and a piece of straw, and he's like, "Okay, you know, like this is kind of weird." And you know, he kind of foregoes all that stuff. He doesn't even play any music, and he kind of just walks around. He stares at cameras and stuff, and he kind of just talks like he normally does. I think just because he doesn't feel like it, he doesn't feel like playing the guitar,
Yeah.
because I think he's seen so much success by just talking. And you know, he criticizes like politicians, and he just kind of like he craps on people like who work there. But then he kind of becomes famous because I think there was a woman working there who said like her house burned down.
Yeah.
And so he basically instigates like this GoFundMe campaign where they got a ton of people to send in money so that she could build a new house. So that kind of like wins the hearts of people, I guess you could say, which is kind of funny. I guess that's kind of the difference now, is that you could be like the meanest person ever. You could say like Rush Limbaugh, like you could be like the meanest,
Mhm.
most vile, most uncharitable person ever, and like you would still have like a really big audience. So that's maybe one thing that they got wrong. This idea that like in order to win your audience, you got to be like really, really nice. You know, you got to be very sweet. You know, but I think that might be one thing they got wrong. You don't necessarily need to be nice. You can be really mean.
Right. Yeah, I think it's more so about whatever persona you have, you kind of have to keep that up. Like with like a Kanye West, like if he is ever anything other than Kanye, even if like, you know, it's a nicer version of him, it doesn't really work or it doesn't fit because that's not, you know, the Kanye. Or even with like Rush Limbaugh, right? He's just this really angry man. And if we see him in any sort of other context, it just doesn't work. And so with that first time he's on television and he's kind of like pointing the cameras at the monitors and he's talking directly into the camera, I suppose, breaking the viewer of the television's fourth wall, because he's refusing to sort of play into the norms of television or play into what, you know, traditionally television is supposed to be. And I think, yeah, it's this, although as we the viewers by this point know, is sort of this false sense of genuineness to the viewers at home and to everyone else. It's, and even to Marsha at this point, it feels genuine. They think like he's just this like really nice, good person, and people just buy into it.
So I think after that he gets his first sponsor.
Yeah.
That part's pretty funny.
So the thing about like films or TV in the 50s, which is really, and actually this goes back to the 30s and 40s too. So instead of having like a bunch, although they still had this at the time, instead of having like a bunch of commercials every like 7 to 10 minutes, typically what would happen is a single sponsor would pay for like multiple shows, or like they basically fund the TV show. And so part of the TV show, like you'd see the whatever they're trying to sell in the background.
Yeah.
So in this case, it was a mattress. And literally the day after I watched this film with Shirley Temple in it called Rebecca from Sunnybrook Farms, I think, or something like it. And it's a really surreal experience after having watched this film, because that film is also, well, in a similar sense, instead of Lonesome Roads, this kind of drunk nobody, it's about this little girl, Shirley Temple, who is is basically convinced is who's basically who's basically convinced to become this star, and the entire show is like sponsored by this like cereal called like crackly cornflakes or something, which is it's a very strange and dark parallel when you look at it in the context of this, because like in that film it's a very happy ending, and in this film not so much a happy ending, but it's a weird parallel. But basically in this film they have their first sponsor, and he's just like, oh, I'm not gonna like try to sell you guys anything. I'm just gonna be real.
He pokes fun at them.
Yeah, he's like making fun of them, and he's like, I would rather sleep on the floor than a mat. Like he's basically like shit talking this mattress company, and people love it. He doesn't really care either way about the mattress. Like he doesn't care. He's indifferent to the experience entirely, but he knows that by creating this persona where like he would never like work for the man, or he can't be bought at any price.
To keep it up, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like his pride, right, is priceless or whatever. So he just like kind of pokes fun at this mattress company, which the mattress company does not like.
Yeah, it's ironic though, of course, because he like pokes fun at them a couple times, and I think they try to sue him.
Yeah.
And then of course, like there's like a mob outside the mattress office, and they're like burning mattresses and stuff. And during that, like the owner of the company learns that like sales increased by like 55% or something like that. Mm-hmm. So like that's the ironic thing. It's like it's not the usual way to sell a product or to sponsor a product, mm-hmm. but it can increase sales. It's not the nicest thing to do, but and it seems like the owner, the mattress guy, was kind of embarrassed or whatever, because he's kind of making a mockery of it. But the sales increased. More people bought the mattress because the show is so popular, And I think this is the moment too where Rhodes is, I think, even more aware than ever of his ability to persuade. Mm-hmm. I think he has a moment like that where he's basically kind of like, oh yeah, I guess I do have like kind of like this weird thing where I can like kind of convince people what to do or sell people. So that's kind of interesting. And then I think he also kind of sleeps with Marcia around this time too for the first time.
Yes, and part of the reason he sleeps with her is so when the mattress person finds out what's going on, he like tells him, you can't do this, like you need to stop. And of course Lonesome Road doesn't stop. So the show's canceled. Like Lonesome Road's basically like he thinks that he's gonna have to go back to like doing nothing again. Like he genuinely thinks that like at that moment that he's done. Like it's the end of him. And so when he comes to Marcia at the moment, there's what seems to me a very real moment of fear and terror, and like the idea that like he had this power and now he doesn't have it, and that having to like face his own existence, or just like the fact that maybe he's not as great as he thinks it is really terrifying to him. And so he goes to Marcia, and Marcia, being just the most smitten person in the world with Lonesome Roads,
she's just obviously it culminates at the end, but yeah, she can't help herself, I guess.
Yeah. So she sleeps with him, and while this is happening, basically like one of the assistants to the guy who owns the mattress store, who simply refuses to get Lonesome Roads back at this point, even though like literally everyone is telling him, look, your sales are like up like 55%. like this guy's just like a terrible business person probably, because like everyone's like, look, you're making so much money, like just get him back. And the business assistant person hears this, and he's like, oh, I know what I'm gonna do. So he goes out and he basically tells the secretaries to start pitching Lonesome Rhodes to a bunch of different agencies, telling him that he's like, free on the market, and he basically he like sells them to like he has like a bidding war between like, I don't know, 10 or 12 different marketing agencies.
Oh yeah, Joey De Palma. Yeah, kind of like a bad with employees like these, you know. But yeah, he does the bidding war, and he gets set up with the company, and they're like, okay, let's go to New York, and they all go to New York. Everybody does. I think even for some reason, even Walter Matthau does, which is kind of weird.
Well, he starts working for he becomes basically like the PR person for.
I think he becomes like a writer or something for the show or something.
Yeah,
like that.
something like that.
He works for Rhodes' company, which is a little bit later down the road. But yeah, he goes to New York City, and he has a meeting with, I guess, the owners of Vitajex. It's kind of funny because I guess sponsors sit around and think of what television shows they can make to sponsor their product. Like you said, it's not even almost it's almost like the sponsor comes first.
Yeah.
Before the show does. It's like, we need to sell our white bread or our peanut butter. What stupid show could we put on? How about the Howdy Doody, like a puppet or whatever? Oh, okay. Yeah, let's do that. You know what I mean? It's like, so yeah, he goes to the Vitajex people, and it's like an energy supplement.
They have like this whole conversation about like what Vitajex is, and there's like a scientist consultant, whoever, like a chemist, and he's like, this is basically just a sugar pill. Like, this literally does nothing. And they're like, we don't care. We just want to sell it. Like, just leave. We don't care.
Yeah, but yeah, and it's brilliant. And Rhodes comes in and he's like, okay, what is this thing? And they're like, oh, whatever. But what he does is that Rhodes, obviously completely untrue, he essentially gives them the idea that it should be, a male enhancement product, essentially dick pills, or an aphrodisiac or something like that. Like he put on, like I said, Andy Griffith, once again, very enigmatic. He's crazy. He's running around chasing after girls and stuff that are in the room and stuff. He's just insane. Mm-hmm. And so just like, I guess, like over the top especially compared to everyone else who generally acts normal. They act like they're in a 1950s movie. And then kind of from there, it's basically, I would say, like a montage.
Incredible montage.
A very good montage. Yeah, a really, really good montage. I will say, like, the montages in the movie are good. I will say that, like, once again, there are just like weird little things here and there that I noticed while I was watching that just didn't, I don't know, just like technical things. Like some of the editing was a little weird. Certain transitions I wasn't a fan of. I thought sometimes it was a little clunky. If certain things were tighter, I think it would be a really, 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 really great movie. I thought the way maybe some of the movie kind of jumped around to certain parts or places, I didn't like very much. But the story is good. Everyone in it is good. I just thought that maybe the construction of the movie could have been a little bit more well put together. That might be my biggest complaint with the movie, just to say it. But yeah, the montage of him, making tons of money, the sales are going up, it's working.
It's very similar to Citizen Kane. It very much parallels the montage in Citizen Kane, where you kind of see him come to power, right? Because at the beginning of the Citizen Kane montage, he's kind of just this local paper who, wants to say things that are true and for the people. But then by the end of the montage, you can see that he's this person with this incredible amount of power who basically does whatever he wants. And by the end of this montage, Lonesome Rhodes is in a similar place.
He's very rich. There's women everywhere. He can drink as much as he wants. I will say, like, his alcoholism is like more apparent earlier in the movie. I guess he still drinks throughout the movie. Mm-hmm. It's never addressed. His alcoholism is never, no one ever says like, maybe you should drink. You know what I mean? No one ever says like, oh, he just, I guess, keeps going.
So I know at some point after this, there's the conversation between Marcia and Lonesome Rhodes about getting married.
Yeah, they have a conversation about getting married. Also throughout the movie too, it's clear that Walter Matthau is kind of smitten of Marcia. That's kind of like a weird thing that I think was added in. I didn't see any point to it. It doesn't really culminate into anything, in my opinion. It's okay. It's like just kind of like an added thing to his character. Mm-hmm. But I wish we'd had more of Walter Matthau, in my opinion. Even if the movie had to be a little bit longer, I wish he was in it more, because he's one of the characters. He's maybe the only character in the whole movie that kind of sees through Rhodes's facade, I guess you could say, which makes him, kind of important in the end. But yeah, Rhodes and Marcia, they have a conversation about getting married. And then I think the next day, Rhodes's ex-wife comes by and is like, I'm gonna say that he has an estranged ex-wife, me, unless he gives me $3,000 a month. And of course, Marsha had no idea that he was married. And then he confronts him. And also, when she confronts Rhodes again, it's clear how famous he is at this point.
Yeah.
He has an office full of people, of writers, probably marketers, crew people. Probably his own TV station is probably in there, TV setup or whatever. Clear how incredibly famous he is. Like, and I think the film does a pretty decent job showing off how famous he is. I mean, he has adoring fans. When he's recording his television shows, there's tons of people yelling and screaming, especially young girls. He's just like over the top shit. So she confronts Rhodes and is like, "Hey, your ex-wife said this," and he's like, "Yeah, we got married in Mexico, and we got it annulled, but that judge ended up being like fired or something like that."
Like criminal charges pressed against the judge.
Yeah, but I'm gonna figure it out. I have to judge a contest back in Arkansas, and then I'm gonna go straight to Mexico to annul the marriage.
Like, do you personally think that like he got married and then like he genuinely got divorced, or do you think like that's bullshit?
You think that's all bullshit?
I think it's bullshit. I think he got married and then he just left.
Yeah, I think it's probably bullshit. Just because like in the conversation between Marsha and his ex-wife, it just seems like Rhodes doesn't really care. He kind of just wandering around.
Yeah.
Do what he actually says he's going to do. So yeah, I believe that he probably lied to make Marsha feel better or something.
And so he goes to Arkansas for a baton tossing competition,
he called it like a baton tossing competition. He called it like a
majorette.
Yes, like a majorette, like a I always think of like a drum major.
Yeah, for like a marching band.
Yeah, he's there to. It's so weird watching it because it's like, this is awful. I'm glad we don't have this anymore. And if we do, it's more, I guess it's more professional than whatever the fuck this is. But it's like 100 girls twirling batons and they're like skimpy outfits.
Very sexualized.
Yeah, it's like the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. It's so good.
Very uncomfortable.
I don't think it, they filmed it to make it seem like it's a good thing or anything like that. Yeah, but it's just like, so I guess like back in the day, what else was there to fucking do? You know what I mean? Like, you really like in 1950s Arkansas, it's apparent that like not everyone has televisions. They have radios, but that's like the only kind of entertainment that they have. And they basically have to put on shows for each other. And the people who are really good at putting on the shows get more attention and more, hopefully more money, the time or whatever. So, but yeah, it's just like it's just like, what the heck is this? This is awful.
So he's at this competition, and of course he immediately sees one of the girls, not women, this is a girl.
17 years old. Yeah.
So, yes, they are very clear to point out that she's 17, which is
weird.
It's a weird thing to put in the film. Like, just make her 18 or 19. Like, it does not affect the film in any way. But they're
I think it's fine that she's 17 because it once again shows how weird of a scumbag Rhodes is.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
He doesn't want to marry an 18-year-old girl. He wants to marry a 17-year-old girl,
And you feel pretty uncomfortable because there's this very and I think this is purposeful. I don't think this is this is not a criticism of the film at all, but there's this very male gaze at this moment, which I think is purposeful and kind of showing who Lonesome Rhodes is and kind of how he sees the world, and also how the viewer sees the world. And I think there is this sort of, like you said, I don't think he's necessarily judging, like he's not saying, oh, you're bad people for having these competitions, but I think he's touching base that like, hey, maybe I don't know, like maybe this isn't the greatest idea in the world.
It's just kind of like absurd. The feeling that I got from it is that like this is just kind of absurd, right? Like this is a little weird. But Betty, I think, is the name of the girl who he sees, and of course, everybody twirls her batons, and of course, he's like, she wins. She wins the cup.
But I mean, she's pretty good as far as like baton twirling goes. I think I don't know. She seems good at it.
Yeah, awesome. She wins, and Marsha is waiting for Rhodes to return so that they can get married. She's hanging out with Walter Matthau. Her and Walter, they have a couple conversations about Rhodes, and they're waiting for Rhodes' plane. And he lands and he announces to everyone basically right there that, guys, I got married to Betty. In Mexico, for some reason, what's like the point of like getting married in Mexico? Is there something like there that I'm missing? Like, what's the point of going? Is it just fun? You know, is it just fun to get married in Mexico because there's like all
So,
kinds of stuff there?
so I think the reason he got married in Mexico is because technically he never got divorced.
Oh,
Like today, if you went to like Las Vegas and got married, like it's really easy to do. I think it's kind of saying the same thing about like Mexico back in the 50s. Like if you went there, you could get married like real quick and you didn't have to like do all the stuff they usually do. I think.
and I guess he was going there anyway to get his divorce or
A
whatever.
2-for-1, I guess.
I don't know if they touched on the fact that he got a divorce or not, but whatever.
So,
But yeah, she has like two chihuahuas and stuff, and it's super funny. And of course, Marcia is crushed. And of course, there's that really good scene where Marcia kind of like claws her way to the front, and she sees like he got married to this one person, and she tries to escape into the wall of like adoring fans who are going nuts. It's like Beatles mania or something, which I guess kind of predicted that.
yeah, it is strange. You see the reporters come up to Betty and they're like kind of moving her in different directions. Oh, you see that one guy with the camera who tries to get like an upskirt picture?
Yeah, they're for some reason like these reporters and random guys are like touching her and like fucking with her. Like I didn't understand that at all.
Weird.
I guess yeah, but I guess whenever I think of like a person arriving like in the United States, I always think of like the Beatles of
Yeah.
like how crazy their fans were, like literally crying, like and stuff like that. And that's kind of and that's kind of how the fans react to him, which is kind of funny because like Rhodes, like of course, is very famous and stuff, but he's not really like a boyish kind of boy
Right.
band kind of guy. You know what I mean? Like I guess I still understand because he's that famous.
Uh-huh.
I guess that's another thing too. I guess there's that dissonance where I'm just like, would like teenage girls in the United States really fawn over this guy?
Well, I mean, he's like a George Clooney or a
Yeah, I guess.
something like that.
I just think that kind of response makes more sense to like a band like One Direction or the Beatles or something like that.
Sure.
These kind of like pretty boy guys who make songs about holding hands and kissing
Yeah.
and stuff. But I digress. I digress.
So at this point, Marcia's after she sees this, she's
Just a little upset.
she's upset, and I think this is the first point in the film where she's kind of realizes that Rhodes isn't this guy who he's always pretended to be, and she's always seen pockets of it throughout the film, but this is the first time where she actually realizes it. And so they have like a wedding marriage thing, or like a TV marriage thing.
It's really funny too. It's crazy. Essentially, like using his teenage wife as like I don't know, like content.
Yeah.
Watch her do the baton twirl.
I genuinely think he only married her because he says, because there's this conversation. Yeah, it makes him look good. I think it's part of like just his persona. Like I think part of the reason he marries her is merely because like, oh, I can sell her. She can be on TV. She's pretty. She's 17. She can do the baton thing. And then that's kind of rolls into the next conversation between Marcia and Rhodes, where she confronts him basically and is like, you're a terrible person because we've had this like weird relationship and you said you were going to marry me and like we deal with your like wife and I've been through like all these, like I've been with you since the beginning. And he's like, well, I was too scared. And she's like, I don't. Yeah. And at this point, she's like, I don't want to be part of this. Like, I don't want to be like, I'm done with this. And he's like, oh, well, I'll give you 10% and you'll never have to work another day in your life. And she's like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. Because she's like, I created you. I'm the reason you're Lonesome Rhodes. Like, you are nothing without me. So she's like, I want 50% because God damn it, I deserve 50%. And he begrudgingly ends up giving her that because, well, he's very aware at that moment. And you see this a little bit later too, that he needs her, that without her, he is nothing. That even though he, creates this persona of being this, self-reliant person who can do pretty much whatever he wants and he doesn't need anyone else, she's kind of the reason that he continues to exist. And as like when she went into to see Mel in that sort of like big dark windowless room with like this engine pretty much of people who are creating the image of Lonesome Rhodes, you can see that although Lonesome Rhodes at the beginning really was just kind of his own person, or like basically it was just him, the moment he gains any sort of fame, there's this whole engine that has to run for him to continue to be him. He's not really himself. He's creating the image of being this genuine person, but the reality is he's run by these giant conglomeration of people kind of keeping him as him.
Yeah, that's another thing that's apparent throughout the movie too, is that like over time, it's apparent that he's connecting himself more and more with like these political and corporate bigwigs who, you're right, are kind of like use him like a pawn. You know what I mean? Because, and this of course kind of goes into, once again, kind of his meeting with Senator Worthington Fuller, who is a presidential hopeful. He's like a stuffy conservative politician with really bad policies. And this, of course, you know, is another thing that was true then and continues to be true now. Rhodes basically says, like, look, you need to basically adopt a country boy persona. You need to pretend that you're not a stuffy, conservative, academic politician guy. You need to make people think that you're like a cool, relaxed country guy who, you know, everyman type person, which of course has continued today. I don't know if you've ever saw this article. It was a politician either from like Colorado or Texas or something like that. He tried to like run in Colorado or Texas or something like that as a country boy. You know, he's like, I like to, you know, do this or that. He has these political ads or whatever. And then people look back at his previous work in terms of campaigning, and it's completely different personality. He's not running, like, they found like campaign ads of him not being a country boy, but just being like a stuffy guy, you know, like a stuffy politician guy. So like, it still continues to this day, you know, it's even when it's so played out, like this idea of, it happens all the time. It's so crazy. And I don't know, I guess people like it. I guess the thing that, you know, that the movie is trying to convey is that this idea of campaigning or this idea of like marketing sort of can maybe, I don't know, upend democracy in a way to where it negatively affects it. I do wish there was more of the political stuff in it. I feel like it happens very quickly, like it starts and then it ends really quickly. I wish it went over the top.
Yeah.
You don't really get like the moment with Citizen Kane where he has the big poster behind him. He's like, you know, you really don't get any moments like that. Yeah. They just kind of put stuff here and there of like Worthington like shooting guns, hunting or whatever. You know, you get like little moments here and there where I guess it's working for Fuller. You know, people are buying that he's like a country boy or whatever. He has a changed image. And they use Rhodes to kind of, he basically becomes a consultant, which now is like a 6 or 7 figure job in Washington, D.C. probably.
I was definitely kind of on a similar path, especially because of all the parallels to Citizen Kane. Like I thought like they're going to say, oh, like, you know, we want you to run for senator or governor or something of that. And I was waiting for like, I was kind of hoping like that would be the like last third of the film would be him kind of running for political office. And that's kind of where he would find his downfall. But they don't go in that direction for, honestly, I don't know why I think that would have made for a stronger film.
That would have been more exciting than just, I don't know, being a consultant. That was his last thing that he did.
But I mean, like he was going to be in a cabinet position. So I guess like there was.
That's true. I forgot about that. They promised him like a made up cabinet position.
Which happens all the time. So it's not like.
Yeah.
The person I thought of when they try to like pitch like this country boy idea to him is, I mean, it's basically what George W. Bush did. Like if you go listen to his speeches, he'll have like this Texas accent, but then if you hear him actually talk to like people off screen, or like you hear him in like conversations that aren't, you know, like public officially, he loses the accent entirely because he doesn't actually talk like that. He created this persona of this like Texas country boy when he was this rich kid. He wasn't even from Texas. He's from like Maine or something. He's from like the East. He's like a rich East Coast kid, but he created this persona of
like in Texas ever at that moment. Like during that time, at like one point or another, he was like part of a family of the richest people in Texas.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other thing too about George W. Bush is that he also started to evoke God a lot in his speeches and stuff like that, which isn't really apparent here. I don't think religion is really.
There's a conversation where Lonesome Rhodes says, "Oh yeah, the only thing in my suitcase is 2 shirts, a Bible, and whatever." And Marcia says, "The shirt thing is true, but I have never seen him touch a Bible in his life."
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
Good moment. So he goes back to his apartment late at night.
Yeah.
And he's walking to like his bedroom, and out of his bedroom comes Joey, the business assistant who pawned his way into becoming the CEO of basically the company that Lonesome Rhodes owns. And he's clearly having sex with Betty.
He comes out and he's just like, yeah, so what? I had sex with your wife. But he's like, and then he's like, oh, you've had sex with all kinds of you've had sex with other women too. And besides, I own 51% of the company. You can't do anything.
Yeah.
He's like,
I honestly think the only reason he's having sex with Betty is just to like show just how how he basically owns Lonesome Rhodes. And Lonesome Rhodes is like, oh, I'm going to fire you. I'm going to get rid of you. But as you said, Joey goes, no, I own 51% of the company. I literally own you. You can do nothing.
It's fucking crazy. But yeah, like De Palma leaves, and then Rhodes is like, okay, you're going back to Arkansas, bye.
He basically says, I'm firing you. And he's like, you get the same deal that I get with every failed act, which is the same deal he gave to his former wife, which is you give them a certain amount of money every single month, and then you just never show yourself ever again.
And so he then goes see Marcia.
Because he's like, I'm a free man now. We can have sex again.
He's crazy. He's so awful.
She's like, fuck off.
And while he's like getting undressed, he kind of goes on this tangent about all the other stuff that he's going to do, including something called a Fires for Fuller proposal, which sounds very fashy.
Yeah.
You know, and Marcia, of course, is now over time now at this point has regretted ever, you know, have anything to do with him. Not necessarily on the micro level between their relationship, because obviously she's very hurt. But also in the grand scheme of things, I think she herself, even though she never really says anything, I think she herself is also recognizing that this is kind of going down a bad road of like this kind of fascism kind of thing of trying to hit the guts and the heart of the majority. The only way that if you know, right-wing politicians can have any say in the country is if they kind of hit the hearts and the gut of voters while advocating for and passing legislation that makes their lives worse. People don't vote for politicians in order to make their lives worse. They want to make their lives better. So they have to do these weird campaigns and personas in order to make people believe that they're the right choice, even though they want legislation that makes their lives worse. So I think, you know, that's kind of the thing with Marcia. She kind of sees it coming. She kind of sees how kind of crazy or weird it is. And so Rose is getting comfortable and Marcia leaves. She basically runs away. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's the next day or the next morning, and it's the next show, and it's the show. It's not. At this point too, I forgot to mention, Rose has a new show called The Cracker Barrel.
Yeah, not a great name.
It's so weird. It's like a show. It's like a talk show, but it's like him surrounded by a bunch of actors who look like rednecks, and it's him just talking. It's a podcast, I guess. And he has Senator Fuller on, say some stuff. Back then, put whatever on TV. It doesn't really matter.
What's interesting about this show is it parallels the beginning when he's first on TV. Because when he's first on TV, right, he shucks off the persona of the country boy. Yeah, and then here, right, he buys in, he tries to sell that sort of country boy, sort of yes man.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, he has the set, Southern or Western goods store, and they have all these actors who are dressed shambly, you know, or whatever. And, you know, he's kind of I think that we should, you know, he's kind of talking about marriage and stuff on the show and talking about, you know, values or whatever, you know, just kind of going on and on about stuff that, like I said, kind of touch the hearts of people very easily.
Yeah.
He can easily pluck the heartstrings of people very well. And yeah, they go on the show in the morning and everyone's freaking out because Marcia isn't there. Marcia does everything. So everyone's we don't know what the hell is we don't know what's going on, guys. And everybody's getting mad and upset. And eventually Marcia shows up and she's in disarray. And Rhodes is we're going to talk later. And they do the show. They do the stupid show. It's just so funny. So yeah, he does the show and the credits start. And they do the thing in the credits of our shows where the credits will roll over Rhodes, but it plays music and not his audio. So what Marcia does, in order to destroy him, she messes with the audio so that you can hear his audio now over the credits. And he is just laying, he's laying into everybody. His real personality came out.
Yeah, you see him as just this terrible, awful person who does not care about anyone and is just talking shit about, you know, and how much power he has and how he could literally basically tell anyone to do anything.
They're all sheep. I can do whatever I want. They're sheep. You know, I think he even says something about Senator Fuller. Yeah, he just kind of lays into and stuff. And then he leaves right away into another one of the really best montages in the movie.
The elevator scene?
Yeah, really good. Yeah.
Loved it. So what's incredible is at this point, Lonesome Rhodes still doesn't know what's going on. He thinks
yeah, he doesn't know. He doesn't know what happened.
He did a great show.
Immediately, you know,
So he gets onto the elevator and they're like 40 floors up. So he's on the elevator, and as he gets on the elevator, they cut to montages of basically different people having seen the show and being like, we have to cut ties with him immediately. So the senator's cutting ties with him, the like production companies cutting ties with him, the advertising agencies are cutting ties with him. And this is all happening while Lonesome Rhodes is just sitting, on the elevator, just like going down.
I find it very unrealistic, but still, but I'm okay with that just because I understand what the scene is trying to do. It's trying to show that Rhodes is literally but also metaphorically falling. He was at the top, and just like that, he's now at the bottom.
It definitely is unrealistic for perhaps the 1950s, but I think there's something incredibly modern about it.
Yeah, that's definitely something that happens definitely more often. People's lives getting ruined very quickly. Mm-hmm. Things can happen very, very quickly over the channels of the internet and social media, especially if your livelihood in your life is precarious, I guess you could say. Even if you're a big famous like internet person, like a YouTuber or something like that, your livelihood is very precarious because if you say or do the wrong thing, which I'm not saying that like, I guess it's kind of like a cancel culture thing or whatever the fuck, which I think is dumb, but it is true, people, there are certain things that people care about. If you say the wrong thing, it could affect your livelihood. And in this case, it's, the same thing. He messed up really bad, and it immediately affected him. So he gets off the elevator. And yeah, like it's a good montage, and people are calling in and like, I'm never going to watch the show again. And
mm-hmm. So he's basically hosting this big event at his apartment that night. He's like giant. Yeah, he's hosting this big dinner where it's supposed to be like the senator's supposed to be there, and like these big wigs are all supposed to be there.
So yeah, he has a dinner. No one shows up to the dinner. He's supposed to, and I think Marcia is confronted by Mel at the station.
Yes.
And I think he says something. He also reveals earlier in the movie that he's writing a book about Rhodes, about the truth about him. And then I think he says, like, I heard you just like wrote the ending to my book, which is good. That was a weird editing thing, by the way. Mel is like kind of talking to Marcia, and he gets a phone call from Rhodes, and they have a conversation. And I think one way or another, Rhodes says or is told that this happened, like that the audio got messed up, and there was a live microphone that was on, and he's trying to talk to Marcia or whatever to tell him to get her to come. And Mel basically says like, okay, yeah, let's go there. You need to tell him what you did. And it's weird. Like Walter Matthau is in like the middle of saying something to her, and then it cuts. Do you notice that? He's like talking about it, and then like it just like cuts to a next scene. It's a very small thing that happens. But they're just like little things like that I don't like in the movie that kind of distracted me a little bit. And that was definitely very distracting. It's like, why would you not let him finish his thing that he was going to say? I don't understand. Either way, they go to his apartment.
And as they kind of get up to his floor, Lonesome Rhodes is giving like this speech or whatever. And he knows what's happened. He's pissed. No one's there. So he's like giving like this speech, and one of his butlers is basically playing like an applause track, which is, it's kind of terrifying. It's pretty dark. It reminds me actually, because we both watched Inside this last week, the Bo Burnham special, and in that scene where he's just like talking in his room and he plays
very haunting laugh track music tracks that are kind of like, yeah, because I think like they are kind of weird how those laugh tracks are, because when he plays them, they're in the middle of cheering and clapping, and then he stops it while they're in the middle of cheering and clapping. You also forgot the part where Rhodes verbally berates his black servants.
Yes, he does do that, which isn't great. And they don't appreciate it. The servants know what's going on. They know that this guy's insane, and they kind of like show that this guy.
Yeah, they're just like, okay. It's...
So Marcia and Mel show up to the apartment, and she reveals the truth to him. And he's not happy about this at all, but he is so delusional and in his own like mind that he's like, oh yeah, like this is all gonna be fixed. I'm gonna be fine. Like this is just like a small bump in the road. A year from now, I'm gonna have so many shows. Everyone's gonna be looking for me. And there's like this long hallway, and clearly Marcia is just devastated. Like she's
very upset.
Incredibly upset. She feels like she knows that she's ruined this person, someone that she's genuinely loved, and not only this person she loved, but also this persona she created, this empire that she built herself. And the floor they're on, you have to take an elevator to get down. And so she presses the elevator button, and the elevator's not coming. And that's when Mel turns around and he gives this just like intense monologue.
He's basically just saying like, look, your career is not over and you will probably be able to get work again, but you will never have the same level of popularity. Which, hey, Rhodes probably would still be making a decent amount of money, but he will never ever again have that same level of just power and popularity that he had tasted for so long. And now it's gone. And that's really what, like you said, what it was all about. It wasn't really money. It's more kind of the influence and the power of it. And he's basically just like, Mel basically says like, that'll never happen again. Like that's kind of over.
And I think it's not just the terror of this part of his life being over. What I think Mel really pushes on here is that you'll be forgotten. You're going to die. No one's going to remember who you are.
Yeah.
He says something like, one of the last lines he says is, 20 years from now, they're going to be talking about, do you guys remember that famous guy from, who was like this? And they're like, no.
Yeah, it reminds me of blah, 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 or something like that.
Yeah. I assume some famous persona of the 1950s. But basically, the real terror and what he basically shows or tells him is that you're going to be forgotten. And to Lonesome Rose, that's the most terrifying thing. More than the power, more than the money, more than anything else, is the fact that however long from now, he's just going to be forgotten and no one's going to care. It's going to be nothing.
And pretty much after that, Marcia and Mel, they get in a car. He's at the top of the building, and they can hear him yell for
Marcia. It's basically the inverse of A Streetcar Named Desire.
I've never seen, but I thought the same exact thing. I know the scene. I don't think it's written by Schulberg though. But yeah, it's like the same exact thing. Which is fine.
The inverse, yeah.
And they get in the car and they drive away, and that's the end of the movie pretty much. They ignore him. They kind of leave him in his penthouse. I will say, I do think that the movie could have ended differently. I kind of wish the movie ended with him being in the same situation he was at the beginning of the movie, like in a jail cell, drunk.
Yeah.
That like something happened.
Yeah.
That would be more interesting than him crying in his penthouse.
So out of 10, what would you rate this film, Andrew?
I would give it a very high 7. It's good. I liked it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I just thought that like some things could have been a little bit better. The montages are very good, and the performances are great. It's funny, it's timely. It's aged very well. I love the idea of it, the idea of like the television, the medium being the message type thing. I just thought that there were some weird editing things that were kind of weird. They do a really bad job making Andy Griffith look like he's playing the guitar. I thought there were little weird little things here and there. The laugh machine comes in, but it's kind of weird that Rhodes invented it. There were a few things that we thought would have been more obvious or better. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I thought I gave my ending idea. I thought that would have been a little bit better or more interesting. I thought the political aspect of it could have been more exaggerated. Mm-hmm. Just more, it's like climbing more and more and more. We don't really get too much of a sense of, I guess that's also the big thing about the movie. I feel like we don't get a very powerful sense of how powerful Rhodes is. For the most part, we do, but I don't think it's enough. I just kind of wish the movie did more and was even more crazy, was even more, I guess, progression to show just how powerful he is, how famous he is. It still does a good job. I just wish it did more, but still good. I liked it.
I would say my rating would be like a medium 8 out of 10. I have a lot of the same complaints you do. I love the experience of the film. I think there's just something about those 1950s kind of black and white, just beautiful films that just kind of, I don't know. I enjoy the experience of it a lot. I agree with you that I really wish the last third of the film would have moved in a different direction if it did. I thought the first third was the most interesting by far, especially when he's kind of in local Arkansas. And kind of is what you're saying. At the beginning of the film, they show his sort of like power in that local community. I kind of wish they would have, not with the same thing necessarily, but kind of keep that up throughout the film and show the real power that he can, have on these people. And I definitely would have appreciated more of Mel as a character. I think he's by far one of the most interesting characters in the film. But I really enjoyed the film. I had a really good time. I think it could have been a better film, but I think for what it is, it's a good time.
I also think it's disappointing too in the fact that like I do kind of wish Andy Griffith would have gone on to do more movies. Yeah. I know people love the show, the Andy Griffith Show, and obviously shows like that haven't aged well. I guess they're more kind of like a comfort thing, I think, for people. Not for me. I don't really care. But yeah, it kind of just shows you that I don't want to say like wasted talent. That sounds like, because I don't know, like I don't want to be that guy to say what a person ought to do. But I do wish, Andy Griffith would have done more idiosyncratic roles like this one, was in movies more often than this one. It's really just like this and maybe like a handful of other movies that he was in. And then he was in those TV shows and stuff like Matlock and the Andy Griffith Show. So I kind of wish he was in more movies because he's like really good. He's a standout.
Truly an incredible performance.
Good, yeah. So yeah, once again, I'm Andrew Harp. Follow me on Twitter if you'd like at ADHarp24.
I'm Austinlugo. You can find me at Austinlugo12.
So yeah, thank you for listening. Please listen to us wherever you can, at whatever you can find podcasts. Leave a review, leave a rating, subscribe. Until next time, until next week, we'll talk about another movie.